today's 9/11. They started celebrating Friday, Saturday, depending on where you were. There were different places that were already celebrating, and I saw it on the bank thing, and then it kind of hits you. It's one of those things that it's 21 years ago, yet those of us who are old enough, we certainly can appreciate what happened at that time, but unfortunately, it'll be one of those things, like many things, it'll be forgotten one of these days. And as the generation that experienced it is getting older, and that's unfortunately the way of the world, as they say. Anyway, today we're going to be studying, this is lesson 11 in your workbook, if you have that. Honesty is the best policy. I have used the format from the workbook. I have followed it fairly well, and then I have integrated the questions in the slides, so by the time we get to the end, we should have covered most of the questions that are at the end of the lesson. So anyway, when we study this lesson about honesty, of course the Proverbs are great. They were written primarily, because they're addressed in the beginning, to young people. When you're younger, that's when to start learning, and you don't wait until you're older to start learning. You need to start learning when you're younger. And the Proverbs, they're truisms. And it doesn't mean, and we'll see that as we go through this, it doesn't mean that they're always true and there's never exceptions, because there are exceptions. It's just like the good and righteous man's going to be rich. Well, sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't. And the evil are going to be, they're going to suffer and for their iniquities, and in the present life. And that's not always true, is it? Because we know people that are sinful that seem to fare pretty well in this world. So we have that dynamic to keep in mind. But what I wanted to do is start by looking at a few of the words that we're going to be dealing with this morning. We're going to find in the verses that we're going to be reading or looking at the word honest. So honest or honesty, good, admirable, becoming, ethically what is fair, right, honorable, deserving of esteem. And you're going to see the word integrity, which means simplicity, soundness, completeness, uprightness, perfection. Righteous means basically to be just, without prejudice or partiality. Blameless, unblameable, unblemished, faultless, cannot be called into account. Upright, straight, uprightness, righteousness, good. What is upright, righteous, good in its character, or beneficial in its effect? And most of these definitions have come from Vines. Honesty, now we're going to see some opposites in the lesson this morning. Dishonest, which means shame, the opposite of honesty. Usury, which is interest on money, and it's used in a negative sense here in the Proverbs. Extortion, it means to beguile or deceive. Deceit means to cheat, to beguile, that which gives a false impression. Perverse, that means to distort or twist, to transform into something of an opposite character. Lying is a falsehood, speaking falsely, to deceive by lies. And then steal is to steal as a thief. All right, so this is, like I said, this is the first general area that the author gave us to look at this morning. And I'll have trouble catching up with my slides. And I'll be moving on to the next page and won't move the slides. So if you see that, just tell me, hey, point to the slides, and I'll move it. Okay, so what else here? So honesty will guide and deliver you. There's 3 verses that the author pointed out here in this first section. Proverbs 11:3, Proverbs 11:5, and Proverbs 11:6. Hopefully you can see this. I had it on a wide format, and Andy came over last night and helped me do this, and then he said, oh no, you can't have it there, and we had to move it to a square one, and then it made the font smaller, and it's like, okay, I think it's okay. So Proverbs 11:3, the integrity of the upright will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. And Proverbs 11:5, the righteousness of the blameless will direct his way aright, but the wicked will fall by his own wickedness. And then Proverbs 11:6, the righteousness of the upright will deliver them, but the unfaithful will be caught by their lust. And I've used the New King James Version for most of these. Now, these three verses carry the same basic thought, that the righteous man is going to be guided by his righteousness, but the unrighteous man will be destroyed. So what would always being righteous and upright look like in a person's life? If you are that, how does that look? What would you say? You're certainly different than the world. Always honest with other people. Francis?
Trustworthy, people that know you would know that you're honesty, then they can confide in you, or they can accept the fact that no matter where you're at or what you do, things are going to be the way that they should be.
All right. So really having a good reputation. Anybody that knows you knows what kind of person you're going to be. You're trying to be a good person, trying to live a godly life, do what's right, and actually less temptation to do wrong. If you're trying to do right all the time, there's not as much opportunity to do wrong, is there? And if you have your mind trained to always do the right thing, always do the honest thing, then there's not much of a choice when it comes to these temptations in life. What's the choice? Automatically, your mind, if you're in the habit of always doing the right thing, then your mind should automatically go to, okay, what's the right thing here? Let's do the right thing in this instance. So that generally is easier. And where do we learn honesty in the first place? Where do most of us learn honesty? Let's put it that way. Norm?
Oh boy, you just changed that question.
I did.
Well, God's Word is the place that we're supposed to learn honesty from, and then we would hope that would be followed in an example by somebody who you then respect, like parents or teachers or government officials or whatever.
Right, absolutely. When you're young is the best time to learn things. And so, yes, when we're young, hopefully parents will take this responsibility to teach their children about honesty and what is right. I had a lesson of that when I was about 5 years old. I took a package of M&Ms from the grocery store, made the mistake of eating them on the way home in the car. And so my mother realized what happened here, and of course I got in trouble. We went back to town, and I had to, I guess, admit what I did, and it hangs with you your whole life. You don't forget something like that. So that was my first lesson in honesty. Now, honesty is a blessing passed down to one's children. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. And of course, I put this as a disclaimer here. We need to remember that these are general statements of truth, because sometimes evil people and sinful people do appear to prosper in this life. So, what is the general truth presented here in this verse? A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. How does that make sense? Any thoughts? Norm?
Well, my first thought on this one just went to the idea of the family. They may not have a lot of worldly goods, but the memories, the ideas and everything that are passed down from generation to generation, you see that in happy families and loving relationships and everything down the line, whereas the folks that may have been successful, wealthy, in the world, when you tend to look at their families, without those principles being applied to the spiritual side, you see destructive destructiveness within the families, generation after generation, even if the generation even survives.
Okay. And generally, that would be a good response for the second verse here, Proverbs 20 and verse 7, that the righteous man walks in his integrity. So it doesn't matter what you have in this world, as long as you are an honest person and you have some integrity and you're trying to do what's right, and his children are going to be blessed after him. And that's where that comes in, you know, if you're a good man, and they always talk about men here, and know that this applies to women too, but if you're a good man and you're upright in all things, people would love and respect you. Nobody's going to speak evil of you. Your children would benefit from a father's good name. If you live in a community and your father had a good name, people automatically assume that you're going to be a good person too until you prove otherwise. So that definitely is Proverbs chapter 20, but in Proverbs 13 it is talking more about the physical things in life. A good man's going to leave an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. And basically what this is telling us is that generally there's going to be an inheritance, you know. Although I see lots of bumper stickers that say, I'm spending my children's inheritance. You know, it's on a big RV or something like that. And so maybe there's less and less of that. But generally, you're going to have something to leave to your children. But the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. What's the sinner going to benefit out of what he gathers in this life when he's dead? Nothing. He's not going to get it. He's not going to get to spend it. And who's going to get it? Other people. And in this verse, it says the righteous, but other people, hopefully not as evil as he was, are the ones that are going to end up getting some of that wealth. And we'll be looking at another verse here in a little while that actually says something very similar. All right. And then to go along with verse 20 or Proverbs 20 and verse 7, it says the righteous man walks in his integrity, his children are blessed after him. And the word blessed here means happy. So why would a righteous man's children be happy after he's gone? Now, it might not mean happy the way that we think of happy, but why generally should you be happy after your parents gone? Shirley?
Because he left a good reputation for you to follow.
Right, right. Yeah, if you have a parent who, like I said, was a good person and lived right and was honest, known for his honesty and his integrity, that should make you happy. Of course, you're sad that you lose a parent, but like I said, you should be happy that they left, you know, that kind of a legacy. And so, yeah, it's not the idea that we're going to be happy that our parent passed away, but we're going to be happy because, you know, they lived a good life and they tried to always do what was right. And then the last part of this, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7, the memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. And of course, this word rot here means rotting or decaying. So what's this verse trying to tell us? Say what?
It will be forgotten or it will be remembered badly, like the old dictators and conquerors of the world are still remembered for their evil deeds.
Right, yeah, absolutely. The name of the wicked is going to rot, absolutely. Who's going to remember that wicked guy when he's gone? Do we try to put to memory bad stuff like that? I mean, you know, yeah, we'll always remember Adolf Hitler. Anybody that was alive during that time, yeah, you were probably going to remember him, but generally, just your average Joe out there that's a bad guy, you know, isn't an honest person, has scammed people and cheated people in his life. You know, a lot of people recognize that, but are they going to remember him after he's gone? Hopefully not. Hopefully not for long. Most of the time you remember the good people and the good person, but you remember less the bad people. Norm?
This is, I don't know if any of us have ever met somebody who named their daughter Jezebel.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That one always comes to my mind in this particular one.
Yeah. Yeah, I teach or sub in preschool quite a bit, and I saw a person named their kid Lucifer. Now, why would you name your child Lucifer? I don't have any idea, but that was the child's legal name. It's just beyond me. Anyway, all right. All right, and then the author of our lesson goes through areas in which dishonesty is common, and he has three broad areas, and that is it's business and, yeah, there's a lot of business. He had a lot of business, and then speech, a little bit on speech and a little bit on stealing. So that's what we're going to be looking at next. So Proverbs 11:1. He listed several verses in here that were similar or had dealt with the same thing. Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Proverbs 16:11, honest weights and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his works. And then Proverbs 20 and verse 10, diverse weights and diverse measures, they are both alike an abomination to the Lord. So what is the importance of weights and measures in Bible times? Why was that important? Francis?
Used when they bartered. They didn't have the money, so they would do this with this much. So the weight would have to be a true weight to get a true value.
Right. Oftentimes, that's what they did. I mean, it was an agrarian economy. Everybody was into agriculture, or most people were into agriculture. You raised livestock. You raised crops. And that's how people oftentimes paid debts and bartered in that system. And so having true weights and measures was very important. This divers word that's used in Proverbs 20 and verse 10, the word divers literally means a stone and a stone. It's the idea of somebody having, multiple sets of weights. Now, would an honest person need multiple sets of weights? No, you should have the same set of weights, and you're going to use them for whatever you're doing. And as Francis pointed out, it was very it was important in business transactions of the day, and there was something else. Yeah, considering that the Lord finds it an abomination, as we're told here in Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 10, is that significant? Should we pay attention to something like that? What's an abomination mean? If something is an abomination to the Lord, what does that mean? Say what? Hatred. And it literally means, let's see. Well, I looked it up, but I didn't write it down. But anyway, it's unlawful. It means, and it denotes an object of disgust. So God is disgusted with people that would engage in these shady business practices of tampering with weights and measures. So what are some areas where honesty in business is important to us today? We know it was important then, but what about today?
All my life, I had to deal with this problem. But the government, the state, had people that they sent out to check the weight and measure, make sure they're all right, make sure the scales are weighing right. So you had to be an honest person to work in a situation like that. And there's a lot that didn't, because you could move the scales and make things a little higher than what they really are. So that's one of the reasons they did it. And you'd have a lot of people that would do that.
Oh yeah,
and that's all I'd done. Was working a meat department of a grocery store. Most of the time I managed the meat operation.
Right.
And you had to have those scales right. You had to be honest.
Right. Of course, we know what meat costs today. And did you ever think that they just put a little more water in that meat? I mean, have you ever thought that that's what they're doing at the grocery store? They're adding water to the meat, or they're doing something But, you know, the government does, the state in this case, they come in and they do pay attention, and they'll make inspections and make sure that you're using the right scales or that your scales are calibrated, you know, exactly. And there's lots of areas in our economy today where we don't think about stuff like that as much. What about buying gas for your car? Yeah, there's a little sticker. Look on the gas pump. There's a sticker that says this was inspected, and it has a date on it and the name of the inspector, the guy that looked at the pump to make sure that it was calibrated correctly so that you're getting the right amount of gas. And when gas was almost $4.50 a gallon, we were concerned about that, weren't we? Clear side.
Probably everyone in business might have to be faced with that, or really any type of position is, you know, you don't necessarily, well, let's not tell them that, or let's not give them all the, even just hiding all the information is a form of being dishonest. So you have to be forthright, and so there's that uncomfortable situation as a Christian, or, you know, just as a decent person, to be like, that's not right, I don't feel comfortable with that, you know, I'm not going to participate in this, and that's not always easy when it's your job.
Right. It's that idea of full disclosure. You know, whatever it is, as a consumer, you have the right to know what's in your food. You have a right to know, how they are inspecting your food, how they're making sure it's safe. You have a right to know, how they weighed it out and whether that's correct or not. Norm?
One of the differences between today and like the time that this was written was the degree of impact that you can have now is much larger. Before you affected what was going on in the village right there, but now a single transaction on a single product might be available to the entire world. It's like gas is down to a thousandth of a gallon is the measurement for how much gas is going into your tank. Think about what a thousandth of a penny would be worth if they just skimmed that off for $1 billion worth of business going out. I mean, it has huge impacts.
Oh, right. Absolutely. If a gas company made 0.1% extra on every gallon that they sold, that doesn't sound like very much, does it? Until you multiply that by several millions of gallons a day, that's a big number then. And that it happens on a much smaller scale too, but yeah, all that's important. There were some other areas I was thinking, propane, heating oil. We don't give those things a thought. We think when they come fill our propane tank, or you're buying natural gas, that gas that's coming into your house, it's all being measured. That's why you have a water meter. That's why you have a gas meter and that sort of thing. Jesse?
Experienced in the last year about 3 price increases on the grocery lines that I carry, right? And sometimes it's kind of open and upfront and clear. And other times it's not deceptive, but it can be, because what they'll do is, they downsize, the bag or the container or whatever. The world will remember that ice cream used to be half a gallon and it's not anymore. And that's sort of a little more deceptive. Now the barcode has to change and all the legals have to change, but you've left the implication that this price on this one has stayed the same, the one next to it, the price went up on it and the package stayed the same. And so that's what you forever want to read on your grocery labels. It's 36.7 cents an ounce. That's really what you want to pay attention to.
Right. Because they change that. I noticed that they change the weights on some things. Maybe a product that you've bought for years and years and years, and you're thinking, they haven't raised the price on this. Well, you just look how much is in there. Maybe the volume has changed in there, or maybe the weight has changed. Shirley?
You used to have a 5-pound of sugar, now it's 4.
Yeah, right. Go and package it. And so it looks the same, similarly, but it's you got to watch for stuff like that. Even buying electricity, we never give that a thought, do we? Yet there's a meter on the side of your house or your apartment, and it's telling you, I think they measure electricity in ohms, but anyway, it's telling you how much you're using. There's a lot of things like that that we just don't think about until maybe prices get really high, and then we start thinking about them, and because we don't like it. But
I worked for the water department for 20 years, and a couple of times we had water meter readers that would just kind of go by a house and just estimate what their water was. Well, nobody complains when their water's low.
Right.
But then the next month, when he maybe reads it right, it'll catch up, and then they'll complain. So.
Oh yeah, I thought many times this water meter reading isn't correct, and I went out and looked at it myself and read my own water meter and 1 month and read it again the next month from the dates that they give you on your bill just to see how accurate they are, because you think, oh, I'm not buying this. This is not correct. But anyway.
We didn't have any done.
Right. Yeah. I've always thought that was going on out there. Todd?
We got a lot of future engineers in the room. So a quick engineering example. I was on an engineering internship, and we were supposed to test the concrete slump to make sure that what the pads that they're pouring are the right mixture.
Right.
And I was told by my boss, you never send a truck back to the plant because it's too wet.
Oh, right.
Because that's just too much money.
Yeah.
And these are our clients. They're paying us. And so you've got to be very, that's obviously dishonest. There's going to be much, I'm sure Jason's probably got more examples of the pressure to be dishonest in your field. And you've got to, there's usually a freshman level class, I think, in engineering school where they talk about ethics. And you've got to have higher ethics than the world around you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think that is an expectation today, that if you're a little bit dishonest, it's not a big deal. So, as a Christian, you have to look at those things and then make a determination about how you feel about it and if it's something that you're willing to do. Anyway, this is business continued. Proverbs 28:8, one who increases his possessions by usury and extortion gathers it for him who will pity the poor. That's similar to that other verse we had before. So what would dishonest usury and extortion involve? And what might that have looked like in Bible times? Dishonest usury. And what did we say usury was at the beginning? I gave you a definition for it. Interest. Yeah. And in the Proverbs, it's usually looked at as dishonest interest or excessive interest. Do we have that today? Yeah, credit cards. There's a good one. They can be all the way up to 29% legally. That's a lot of money, interest to pay on a credit card, isn't it? It depends on how good your what's your credit score? Is there no name for it? Yeah, your credit rating. Yeah, that's why they make a big deal about your credit rating. The higher your credit rating, the better interest rate oftentimes you get on home loans and car loans and those kind of things. So, but absolutely. And so there were people in Bible times, they made a living by lending people money and charging them interest. At least we have banks today that are regulated, or we feel like it's a safer operation today than it was then. You had a lot of unscrupulous business people at that time. And in fact, we'll look at that a little closer. But anyway, in a minute. But all right. Yeah.
Well, this was a big deal with the Jews because, of course, the Jews were not supposed to charge interest to Jews, but they could charge interest to everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, as they were gaining the reputation of being overcharging to the Gentiles, basically, amongst the Gentiles, the Jews got a bad name as a result, in the Shylocks of the world and all that kind of stuff came as a result of this kind of behavior. And it ruined the reputation for all time of a whole race of people.
Right. So if they couldn't charge money to their brethren, you think they were going to get a little extra from the Gentiles that they were dealing with? Probably so. And in Proverbs 20 verse 17 says, bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. Now that's an interesting proverb. It immediately makes me think of chocolate-covered coffee beans. They're great when you first start chewing on them and eating them, but then that chocolate's gone and all that's left is that gritty coffee bean that's left, and I have to spit it out. To me, that's what I think of. But anyway, what does that mean? Exactly. What are we being told here? Francis.
I know, for example, whenever I was working and we had production, many people would write the wrong check. They would say they produced this much, but actually they didn't.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
And then also, if you're working in a team, which at one point in time we did have a team system, and people in the team would do things, and if you didn't go along with it, oh man, you was hurt. And I hurt a lot because I told them that I don't have to have a camera on me to see what I'm doing, because he's always watching me. So I can't, with all honesty, say, this is what we did.
Right.
And it comes back on you, big time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think this is where, the saying, something leaves a bad taste in your mouth. I think this is probably where it comes from, something very similar. But yeah, even if you're a crooked businessman, if you're able to get a little extra out of somebody, oh, that's great at the time, but hopefully then later you'll feel bad about it. You'll think, oh, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. I shouldn't have done that to that person. They needed that money for something else or whatever. But, sometimes you have people that have a conscience, and sometimes you don't. And then so I asked the question, in order to feel guilt, what must a man have? Well, a conscience. And how is that regulated, or how do we develop a conscience? Norm?
A working conscience.
Right.
Well, we have to develop it. We can develop it for good or bad. You can learn the things of the world, and your conscience will be now unaffected by anything that happens there. It seems perfectly fine. Can't understand why more people don't do it. And the other direction is God's Word, and now that then makes it so that we have the correct standard, and as a result of that, when we do something wrong, we feel guilt or we feel anger when we look at what the world is getting away with over here, and when God, we're going to see this turn around.
Right. Typically, that's one of those things we learn when we're young too, right, Erica?
Know in my family and just hearsay from other people, we probably all do. It made me think of the example of people who try to swindle the government and not pay their taxes correctly. Right. I personally have family members that have gone to jail because of back taxes so much. They were in business and they were swindling, and so you think it's sweet right then when you're doing it, but then you're literally left with gravel. You're in jail. It's not it's not a good experience. You're having to pay hard. You're having to bite that gravel. Right. So that's kind of what, when I read this, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, absolutely.
I had in the past, when you're talking about doing your taxes, I keep a small savings account that I have tied to my checking account. If I have an overdraft, it will automatically get pulled out of there. So it gains minuscule cents a year, 50 cents. And then you get a statement. It comes way after all your other tax stuff is done. And I'm thinking, oh no, here's interest that I should have reported on my taxes. And then I feel guilty about it. Like, have I done something wrong? They're going to come after me. And I asked the tax guy once, and he said, if it's less than $10, you don't need to worry about it. Okay. Yeah. That verse that Norm mentioned, 1 Timothy 4:2, it says, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, meaning that, your conscience is not directing you and telling you in right and wrong. It's been seared, and so that, you don't care about that anymore. You're going to do what you want to do, what pleases yourself, that sort of thing. We have a similar verse in Titus 1:15. To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but even their mind and their conscience are defiled. So yes, we can defile our conscience. Even if you were taught as a child, what is right and wrong and good and honest and that sort of thing, you can be defiled. And it's kind of like what Francis said, you know. Well, if I just round this up, my production, just a little bit, it should be okay. And everybody else does it. And, you know, you buy into that mindset. And next thing you know, you're doing it. And so, anyway. All right. Also, in this area of business, it says, a faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. And a similar proverb, 28:22, a man with an evil eye hastens after riches and does not consider that poverty will come upon him. So, what's being condemned in these passages? Greed, desire, get rich quick, that sort of thing. If that becomes your focus in life, chasing after riches, what then is not your focus? Spiritual things, because all you're doing is chasing after the world at that point. And I think, or maybe I would ask you the question, don't we teach our children this? I mean, not we personally, but isn't society teaching us today that we need to be out there trying to gain everything we can get in this life, that we should make all the money that we can make? We need all those things that people have. You know, you go drive through neighborhoods, maybe an upper class neighborhood, nice homes, nice yards, everybody has a boat in their yard, everybody has, you know, whatever, and you're thinking, you know, don't you think your neighbor buying stuff like that influences you to buy some of the same kinds of things and to try to get to the same place in life? Francis?
Gone through a lot of neighborhoods and saw a lot of things, and I go home and see what I've got, and I'm thinking, mine's paid for.
That's true. That's certainly one way to look at it. At least if it's paid for, it's yours and nobody can take it away from you. You're not owing the bank every month for it. Okay.
I was going to say, I hear, like, with this and riches and stuff, I think in the Christian world, we can, I know among the women anyways, we can get caught up of, you know, we can't be hospitable unless our house is perfect. We can't, or if we don't have this or don't have that. And I tell Jody and I tell other women, we do not live in the magazine. Magazines are fake. The internet pictures are fake. Pinterest is fake. It's not reality. And it's okay not to have all the other things that the world has in order to have people in your home. And I think that, like, I know I used to struggle with that. I didn't want to have certain people over because I knew they had this or that at their home. How are they going to view when they come to my home? Right. And we shouldn't view each other that way.
Right. Yeah, we're supposed to be content with what we have in life, and that's a little bit difficult to do sometimes. But it's nice, it's refreshing to be around people that you can tell are not pretentious and they don't care that they don't have as much as everybody else, and they're perfectly happy where they're at. I think that's great. And then this other verse, Proverbs 22:22, do not rob the poor because he is poor, nor oppress the afflicted at the gate. What was going on in Bible times in most cities that had a gate? Who gathered there?
The leaders.
Well, the leaders did, but also the poor people and the people begging alms. Those were the people that were there, and were admonished there not to oppress the afflicted at the gate, or not to try to rob the poor. An example of that might be or taking advantage of the poor. You know, I've thought of the story of 2 Samuel, in 2 Samuel 12:4, you know, where it's the story of David and Bathsheba, and the prophet says, he tells the story about the rich man going and get the poor man's sheep, his lamb, and using that one instead of taking one out of his own flock. But that's robbing the poor, I would think. And then in Matthew 18:28, the unforgiving servant who begged his master to forgive him of his debt, and he forgave him of a huge debt. And then he went out and, you know, tried to collect debts from the people that owed him money, and he wasn't very forgiving, was he? And when the master found out about it, this guy, he paid the consequences for it. But anyway, yeah.
And the application of the ewe lamb story was taking another man's wife.
Right.
Uriah the Hittite was the poor man because he only loved one woman. He was trying to do God's will with one wife. David has many.
Yeah.
And yet he takes what he can take. It's like Jolene in the song, just because he could.
Yeah. He was the king. He had everything. He had everything already. Why did the rich guy need this poor man's lamb? Yeah. All right. And we are quickly running out of time. Okay. This one, we're going to go through this fairly quickly. This is still talking about business. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. Better is the poor who walks in his integrity than one perverse in his way, though he be rich. So it's kind of like what Norm was saying earlier. You know, it's if you're poor, but you have your integrity, you're honestly poor, but you haven't resorted to, you know, unethical business practices and cheating people and lying to try to get ahead. You know, at least you've got that. You've got your integrity, and that's something you can pass on to your children rather than the person who is out there, you know, trying to make gain illegally. And how important is a good name among the saints and among people in the community? Is that important? What'd you say, Shirley? Yeah, absolutely. That's what it says here. It says, good names be chosen rather than great riches, or better to be poor and have your integrity than... and I thought about a couple of people here. You know, in Acts chapter 6 and verse 3, when the apostles chose men to serve tables, what did they look for? Men that had a good reputation. That was one of the primary things that they were looking for, somebody that had a good reputation from among them. Gamaliel, you know, even though he was a Pharisee, in Acts 5:34, he was a Pharisee, but he was held in great respect by all the people, and they listened to him. How do you think he got that way? By being a good, I mean, as far as a Pharisee was concerned, he was a good Pharisee. And he evidently tried to be fair and righteous in his assessments of things. Barnabas, who was, they didn't call him by his name Joseph, they called him Barnabas because it meant a great encourager. And so that's the reputation that he had. So those things are important. All right. And then we're about out of time. This is terrible. Speech, dishonesty in speech. Proverbs 12:22, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. How serious is lying? Pretty bad, isn't it? Pretty bad. We've got a couple of verses. One in Revelation 21:8. What does it tell us? It gives us a list of sins, and then it tells us that all liars shall have their part in the lake with burns with fire and brimstone. That sounds a little ominous, doesn't it? I think we need to pay attention to that. Let's see. And then it talks about whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. That's the second bell, isn't it? Sorry, too much, but I would rather have too much information and not run short. So, all right, that's it for this morning. Thanks very much.